SGA, step back three, on the way! High from SGA, right on the Magruder, hard foul, count it! He has just got so much confidence right now.
Well, crew, today we are talking about a player that Thunder fans have fallen in love with this past season. His name is SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, second-year guard, and we're talking about a game back in December when he was really coming into his own, a then career-high 32-point performance against the Phoenix Suns in a 126-108 victory at Chesapeake Energy Arena. Chris, I want to start with you just about this time of the season in SGA's life, getting adjusted to being a focal point of the offense and what you thought this game said about him as a player.
Well, I think that we were starting to see the SGA that we became the player that we love was coming into his form right about now, as you said. He wasn't a big-time scorer in L.A. his rookie year. He just didn't have that opportunity because there were just other primary scorers, guys like Danilo Gallinari, Lou Williams coming off the bench. And even though he played all 82 games, he just wasn't the primary option. But with OKC, he was starting to become the primary option. And he was a primary scorer in the game against Phoenix. Now, he does not need a lot of space to work with to operate. I think that's something that we've seen over the course of the season, that he can make some amazing plays in very tight spaces. But when he does have the space, then everything gets accelerated. The scoring was up, and that led to a really fun 32-point performance against the Phoenix Suns in this game.
Well, you look at how, he set the table, everybody. I mean, what was happening that week? The Thunder had just come off two back-to-back massive comeback games. Schroeder was the man of the week, right? So, and all of a sudden, Shai just has his game out of nowhere, like a second-year player probably can have. I mean, can he sustain that? We'll talk about that later, but that's what I liked on this particular night. The schedule was grinding the Thunder at the time, first of all. They had played every other day for the last week. It wasn't going to stop until right after Christmas. And all of a sudden, he just quietly has this kind of big game that we got so used to seeing, everybody. Devin Booker coming back that game, clearly he was a top player. And once again, Shai, the best player on the floor, no DeAndre Ayton that night. So it was all about the backcourt for both teams. Kelly Oubre, I mentioned Booker, but, I thought the man of the hour in the game in a blowout later on in the fourth quarter was definitely Shai, especially when you talk about, did we expect this at that time, Paris?
Right. And I'm glad you laid out that context, Mike, because his craftiness was on full display in that game. I think the Shai scoop really became an integral part of the Thunder vernacular at that point, because the game was really bookended by Shai scoring outbursts. He had 10 in the first quarter and then 10 in the fourth quarter as well. And just his ability to just get to the rim and really highlight his creativity and craftiness, even in situations like sometimes he wasn't the first option of a play and maybe the play kind of broke down. Second option, nothing happened. This really showcased the ability for Shai to make something out of nothing and find a way to get to the rim regardless.
As you mentioned, Paris, he scored at all three levels of the floor in that first quarter, behind the arc, in the mid-range, at the bucket. And then to close out this game as the Thunder pulled away in the fourth quarter, again and again, hit some devastating Euro steps on his way tiptoeing to the basket. So did a really nice job of helping close out this game in one that wasn't particularly close, which was nice for the Thunder given what they had just had the previous two games at home. But that was kind of typical of Shai all season long, a guy that moved up to almost being a 20-point per game scorer. Just your thoughts, starting with you, Mike, about what Shai showed you this year overall in this second season in the NBA.
Well, when you look at, he's on the floor with guys like Danilo, CP3, Schroeder. You're going, okay, in a kid's second year, he's going to kind of like defer to these guys. And if you look at it, over the course of the season, the deferment wasn't there. He all of a sudden became the man. And if you look back, it probably started from this game where all of a sudden what I thought he brought most of all is consistency. And that's hard to do in this league, being a second-year player, especially when you get traded after your first year, so your confidence may be battered a little bit. His confidence level was off the charts. And I thought it just kind of reverberated through the team. He learned to play off of each other. He wasn't trying to be the man. He just simply did what I thought was the basics, and he did it night in and night out, which is hard to do, I think, Paris, for a young player.
Yeah, I really want to highlight that consistency that you talked about. His scoring, as we saw at the beginning of the season, was just off the charts, averaging nearly 22 points a game during that month of October, kind of bleeding into a little of November. But then Nick, I talked to you about this sometimes, that sometimes his numbers tapered off a little bit in terms of scoring, but what we didn't see was that Shai was getting pulled off the floor. And that's because he has the ability to impact the game on so many levels. His length allows him to compete amongst trees to get rebounds, and obviously he's the point guard, so he has the ability to facilitate at a high level as well. So in short, I think this season he's really offered a lot of offensive impact outside of scoring, Chris.
Yeah, no, this coaching staff has really emphasized the development in the overall game for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We know that he can score now. We know that he can get to the rim and put the ball in the bucket. He's a respectable three-point shooter, but the coaching staff throughout the season emphasized him affecting the game in other ways, playing defense. He's got that length that can kind of swallow up offensive players, rebounding the basketball, which was way up this year compared to last year, and just being an overall player on both ends. And I think that we saw that growth. We saw that development as the season went on. We always like to look at the scoring. Yeah, he had the career-high 32 points, but he's one of those players that impacted the game in so many other ways. And I don't think that we have seen the best of SGA yet, because we saw that big jump from year one to year two, which is always maybe the biggest in the NBA for young players. And then who knows what's going to happen from year two to year three. But SGA's game still very, very raw.
He's a durable guy. He only missed one game this season. It was the one in Boston. But as you're mentioning, Chris, he's had some of these statement performances to show that he can do it all. I think in the 2020-10 game up in Minneapolis, that was a big-time showing that coming off of a performance where the Thunder had a really hard time rebounding the ball against the Lakers, that Shai was going to go out and get it done. I think it was just further proof that he was continuing to take strides forward as a player. As you guys project what his impact was going to be in a playoff series, what stands out to you about some things that he was going to be able to do against elite talent? Paris, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the one thing that Shai really has on his side is his sponge-like ability to kind of learn as the season goes on. We've seen that, just you guys have mentioned the first season to his second season, the strides that he's taken. And I think throughout this whole season, especially with the Thunder, he's learned so many things. As defenses start to learn his game, he starts to develop counter moves and other ways that he can get to the rim and find a way to score and impact the offense. And I think what we were going to see in the playoffs, or what he has the ability to do down the stretch, is just continue to build his repertoire out to where he uses his size, his length, and his athleticism and becomes a really, really tough player to guard.
Well, I think, first of all, Nick, when you talk about possibility playoffs and future of a kid like that, there's some certain criteria you have to have. You have to be able to play defense. You have to be a good passer in this league, because remember, he's 6'5". The expectation was that he may be a point guard. Now that's still in his distant future. But when you talk about what he brings and what he can bring in a situation like that, a short game series or whatever, he's got it all. He can defend. I think he's a really underrated passer. We don't talk about his passing ability. I think it should get a lot more credit. But I think, probably his best asset from what I saw in him is that he can also throw in his craftiness off the dribble and finish around the basket. Now, I know there's two things the NBA wants to do. They want to stop you from shooting a three, right? And they want to stop you from getting layups. What he has shown is that he can do a little bit of both, but he's almost become, now I say this with light respect, the master at finishing around the rim in a variety of ways.
I was really interested to see how defenses adjusted to defending him in the playoffs, because he was so effective in putting the ball on the deck and getting to the rim. It's what we saw in the game against Phoenix that we're previewing. I mean, he just had so much space to work with. Would teams take him out? Would he be a priority for teams to sort of neutralize his ability? And that's something that I really wanted to see going forward, because he's taken such big leaps forward And it was just so fun to see. And whether or not he would be able to do that is something I know that we would want to see in the postseason.
Shai was starting to earn the reputation as a late season surger in the SEC tournament and NCAA tournament during his 1 year at Kentucky. His numbers completely blew up. The last 19 games of his 2019 season with the Clippers, he averaged 14.5 points, 4.5 assists on over 50% shooting. This was a guy who I was sure we were going to just continue to see better and better from in the final 2 months of this 2020 season. Remains to be seen whether we will actually get to see that, but I think Thunder fans know that Shai's stock is just going to continue to rise, and they're excited to be on the ground floor of that. Everybody, thanks so much for being with me and talking about SGA.